going slightly mad. I'm going slightly mad.
Hello. Hello, Aloysius. How's your writing going? You're a bit confused about person. Oh, you mean you're confused about first person, second person, third person? Yes, you're not sure which to write your book in. Ah, well, that's really good. So I think we're going to do this as two parts because they both take a bit of explaining. You thought I said there were three. Yes, there are three, but nobody does second person. It's incredibly difficult to do. It's almost impossible to sustain for a novel. I say almost. There are about 2 or 3 examples, one of which is Italio Calaviro's If on a Winter's Night a Traveller, which you are quite welcome to read, but it's very, very hard, to the point that it's more of a writing experiment than anything else. Is not really, truly something you would write an entire novel in. So we're going to focus on first person and third person in these 2 videos. So let's start with first person. The one where you're the hero. Well, actually, no, that's not actually how it works, Aloysius. But it's I. Yes, it's I, but I is a character. How can I be a character? I is a character. I is not you. We're not talking autobiography. But if I'm a character, it's easier to write. This is probably the biggest problem that people find they encounter with first-person narrative, is they mistake the I. Now, first-person narrative is the narrator is, generally speaking, not generally speaking, the narrator is the hero, even if they don't want to portray themselves that way. So The Great Gatsby is about Nick, not Gatsby. He's telling this story, and you as a reader have to work out, why is Nick telling us this story and not another story? He puts himself at the side, but that doesn't mean that he's a side character. He's putting himself there for a very particular reason, and it's very clever. It means that it's not so simple to read the book as if it were told in third person. Yes, first-person narrative is much harder than it looks. It looks like I, but what it is, I is a character. You need to know your character so well. Your I is going to be telling your story for a reason, and you need to think about, what is the reason my character is telling this story for? That sounds like it can become very confusing very fast. Yes, it can. And as an author, as a writer, you need to know before you write your story why your character is telling this story. What is it that they want the reader to understand? But can't they just tell us straight up no? Because human beings aren't like that. Human beings don't always understand why they're doing the things that they're doing. They have unconscious desires and biases that make them think that they're telling this entirely straight up and without any need for personal justification, vindication, or anything else. So first-person narrators are not always reliable. No, first-person narrators are not always reliable. And in fact, you should always interrogate your first-person narrator about what it is that they are telling and how reliable what they are telling is, no matter how objective they may seem at first, which is also a very good thing to bring to any of your reading. Do not ever take a first-person narrative at face value. A first-person narrative is being actively constructed by that character to put them or others in a good light or a bad light. Like what? Well, think of Jane Eyre. Yes. The silly girl who married a person who was clearly a controlling, narcissistic, abusive man. Yes, him. Yes, and how she frames that narrative. Because we only ever see his poor, mad, locked up wife through him. Yes, it is possible to read against what we are presented. Mr. Rochester only ever tells us his version. There is no story from Bertha Rochester's perspective. But she tries to burn him in his bed. If somebody locked you up for 10 years and stole your fortune, wouldn't you try to burn them in their bed? Fair call. Exactly. Another one, and I think Janice is going to talk about this more, is what about the narrator in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest? Yes, he has serious mental illness problems. That's why he's locked up in a closed ward of a psychiatric hospital. Yes, it is very difficult for him to know what is reality and what is his hallucinations and what is the effect of the drugs he's been given. Yes, we should be very, very careful when we interrogate his narrative and take it at face value. So you're saying that first-person narrative is inherently far more difficult than we were led to believe? Yes. What you were led to believe about first-person narrative being straightforward I is much, much more sophisticated writing than you had been led to believe. You are not the main character. The main character is not the man or woman who has their name at the front of the book. The main character is a character, and they need just as much change and just as much development as any other character, more so because you are filtering the entire story through their perspective. Changing a third-person narrative to first-person is more than just changing pronouns, and vice versa. Changing a first-person narrative to a third-person narrative is more than changing pronouns. It is and tense. That's the other thing. First-person narrative is always past tense, so we are always viewing something in retrospect, not as it has happened. We are viewing it not only filtered through a character, but filtered through a character through time. This makes first-person narrative a lot more difficult than it first appears. What about epistolatory novels? Well, epistolatory novels are also first person. They are also filtering the world through their perceptions. So remember, we had a look at, Her Ladyship had a look at Dangerous Liaisons, and she had a look at Werther. And both of those are told all through letters, and we only get the letter writer's perspective on the situation, which is made very, very fun because Valmont lies a lot and you can't tell what he's actually thinking or doing, and you can read him in multiple different ways. Yes, so first-person narrative is inherently subjective. What if I want to tell an objective novel? Well, if you want to tell a novel from a more objective perspective, then we will talk about that in our next video when we talk about third person narrative. But anyway, do you think that you understand first person narrative, Aloysius? Yes? Yes, you might read some of those books. Yes, that would be a very good idea, to read some of those books in first person narrative and to have an idea of it before you start writing it. Okay, you ready? You good? Okay, so we'll go now. Bye-bye. De boca finger, ich bin ja Jesus, bin Bye-bye. If you would like to support this channel, come across to the Black Cockie Press website, www.blackcockiepress.com.au, where you will find books, writing courses, and other materials to help with your writing.